Dustin Childs, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
So where have you been in the past couple weeks or months?
Well, I've been in Ireland for a couple weeks for our latest Pwn to Own,
Nice.
which is a contest that we hold where we invite some of the best hackers around the world to come in and hack the latest devices or software and see what is the security of what we consider to be our daily use.
Cool. Does anybody get in trouble at these events?
No, fortunately, we don't get in any trouble. At least we haven't in quite a few years. So it's all white hat hackers who are come in and they're doing this, with permission. So they're doing this on closed networks. They're doing it in a controlled environment. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. I mean, we had one hacker come in from the NCC group who hacked the Samsung Galaxy. So that was quite interesting. He was very excited when he was able to do that. That was worth $50,000.
Oh, nice.
So not only does he get the device, but we pay them as well.
Yeah, cool. So what is your relationship with the Pwn to Own?
Well, I'm the head of threat awareness for Trend Micro's Zero Day Initiative. So part of my job is to understand exactly what's going on, what the threat is, so I can kind of reach across all of Trend Micro's threat research teams and see what's going on, where, and understand what the threat is to our customers, and then tell that story to as many people as I can.
Cool. Well, looks like you're in the right place. I will do my best, Dustin.
Yep.
Cool. So the Zero Day Initiative, how long have you been there since beginning, or when did you get into that?
So I actually joined the Zero Day Initiative in December of 2014. So I've been here almost 10 years now. And doing this for quite a while. The Zero Day Initiative has been around since 2005. So we're actually approaching our 20th anniversary next year. But I've been around for about half of that. And prior to that, I was actually at Microsoft, and I was at the Microsoft Security Response Center. They're the people who do Patch Tuesday. So I was receiving bugs from the Zero Day Initiative to be patched by Microsoft. So I've been involved with ZDI since about 2008. And I'll tell you, it's a lot easier on this side. It's a lot more fun on this side, to be sure, too.
Cool. Just to go back in time travel, what was like when Microsoft released Patch Tuesday? What was that like back then?
Well, back in 2008, I mean, it was a big deal. We'd get there early, we'd have breakfast, and then at 10 a.m. Pacific time, we'd check everything and make sure it was good to go, and then we'd release it, and then we'd hit a song, like they would play a song in the hallway, like really loud. It was usually like classic rock. I think one time it was Klingon. So it was, a celebratory thing that like once a month we were trying to make the world a better place. So it was a big deal back then,
Cool. Wow. And fast forward to today. It's still on Tuesdays though.
It's still Second Tuesday, still Patch Tuesday.
Yeah.
I don't know how they do it, if they still play music, but yeah, definitely a lot more bugs they have to deal with now. I mean, they're patching LLM bugs. They're patching, open source bugs, which I never would expect. Back in 2008, Steve Ballmer was like, "No, we'll never do Linux," and now they're patching, Linux bugs.
Right.
So it's definitely changed. It's definitely a wild time.
Yeah, and I guess you of all people can confirm that Microsoft does actually care about these things. A lot of people just
They
throw
actually
shit
do.
at them,
Yep.
but they have a lot of good people working there. So
Yes, they mess up a lot, but they do have a lot of good people working there. They have a very tough problem, and I always root for them because Microsoft doing well is better for the world, but I'm often disappointed in them as well. So
yeah,
it's kind of that's where we're at.
yeah. Don't want to use love hate, but respect. Respect. So I mean, I've had the pleasure of speaking with a lot of your colleagues, even those that have come from that work with the Zero Day Initiative. But for those that haven't heard about it, what is the Zero Day Initiative? And Trend Micro for that.
Sure.
Even though if you haven't heard of Trend Micro by now, I'm very surprised you're listening to this podcast. You haven't heard Trend Micro, but yeah.
So the Zero Day Initiative is the world's largest vendor-agnostic bug bounty program, and vendor-agnostic are the key words there. So like Microsoft has a bug bounty program. They buy Microsoft bugs. HackerOne runs bug bounty programs for companies. They buy the bugs that contract, the companies contract them. We buy bugs in just about everything. So we buy Microsoft bugs, Adobe bugs, Google bugs, Apple bugs, Dell, Cisco, IBM. You kind of get the point. So we buy across everything. And what we do with that is we turn those bugs into threat intelligence and filters for our products. So that's where the zero-day initiative part comes in. So if you're a Trend Micro customer, you're getting protections on average about 90 days ahead of everyone else. Whoa. Because we're buying these bugs ahead of time.
Cool.
And people will say, well, 0 days are like so rare and so expensive. I don't care about 0 days. But what people forget is 0 days become in days. So it's something has been patched in number of days. Those are incredibly common. So once like Patch Tuesday happens, it's Exploit Wednesday. And that's just the common thing. So those 0-day protections go in and are still there when you're rolling out your patches, when you're testing. And we know people do not patch anywhere near fast enough. And it's kind of like saying, oh, yeah, Mr. Dentist, I floss. No, you don't. You don't patch fast enough. You don't floss. You're like, these are lies. We know these are lies. The average that we're seeing for critical is 90 plus days. However, for critical bugs, they're being exploited within 48 hours.
Right.
So that's one of the things where we see this stuff and we know you're not patching fast enough. But those protections, if you're a Trend Micro customer, then you get those ahead of time. So that's really what ZDI does. And we enhance our own research too. About half the bugs that we talk about so that we get patched are from ZDI researchers. So we have our own group of researchers who are finding and reporting bugs all the time. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. So it's really interesting to see the information that comes through the program, to see what type of bugs there are, what gets patched, what doesn't get patched. Because one of the things we do is we hold people accountable. So after 120 days, if you don't patch it, we release a certain amount of information to make sure that vendors are held accountable.
Very, very, very cool. I have a lot of questions I just wrote down, but that last one there, you said you released a little bit of information, right? I've always thought, like, why do security researchers like release exploits? Or like, okay, I get that you have to hold the like the vendor accountable. I really understand that. But then again, it's like, what do you think about like those researchers out there? Obviously, I would assume that you don't do it. You don't release everything that they can make like an exploit. But what do you think about those that do? Like, what is I know there's an interesting conversation there.
Yeah. The disclosure debate has been held for years and will probably be held for years to come.
Yeah.
Obviously, when it comes to full disclosure, like what you're talking about, releasing exploit code and everything, I don't agree with that personally. But I also understand that because there's a lot of frustration behind that, where you have vendors who are not being honest brokers, who are ignoring researchers, who are doing whatever, and the researcher feels that their only recourse is to release everything. That's unfortunate for a lot of reasons, and the main reason is because it's putting customers at risk. So like when we expose something, what we do is we release a certain amount of information that we think is useful to defenders so that they know what to do to protect themselves from this unpatched bug. But we don't release like proof of concept code. We don't release exploits. We don't do that sort of thing. But for those who do, obviously I disagree with that, but I also understand their perspective, where there's a lot of frustration behind that, a lot of distrust behind that, and a lot of hurt. And that's why I hope that the Zero Day Initiative and other programs like ours can be kind of a safe harbor for those people. So if you're an individual and you go to a huge company, whether it be Microsoft or Apple or Adobe, they might not take you seriously because you're an unknown quantity. But if you sell something to the Zero Day Initiative, then the ZDI is representing you. And then, you're being represented by a known quantity and that you're taken seriously more often. So that's one of the things we hope to do with our program, is give people the opportunity to be financially rewarded. Because, this is hard work. This is a big deal, finding these bugs, but also be represented in a way where they're taken seriously and their research is handled.
How many security researchers do you have under the ZDI umbrella?
Well, over the course of the program, over the last 20 years, we've had over 10,000 researchers participate. At any given time, it's 300 to 500 who are really active.
Yeah. And are those like similar people that would be on like HackerOne and those sort of platforms as well?
Yes,
Yeah.
very similar to that. I mean, there are people who are researching, there are people who are disclosing sometimes directly to the vendors and sometimes to us or maybe exclusively through us. One of the things that we do is we kind of have a frequent flyer program.
Mm-hmm.
So like the more you submit, the higher you can earn. So our top level gets 25% bonus. So if we pay you 1,000, then it becomes 1,250, that sort of thing. So we encourage you to report everything through us. But yeah, it would be the same type of people who are doing research, usually as a side gig, but we do have a couple of people who do it full time.
Mm. And I mean, I'm in deep water here, but like when you're going to be doing this type of research, I know that like I was just at an industrial security conference and you have guys there that are, you know, they're like, I want appliances. I want your stuff so I can take it apart, break it open. What are some of like the, I feel I was trying to remember a conversation I had there because it's like sometimes that's illegal, right? Taking somebody's appliance, breaking it apart, understanding how it works, even if it's in the name of security research, right?
Well, there's illegal and then there's against the terms of service. So I would say it's against the terms of service in a lot of cases. Illegal is a legal question that I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an attorney. I'm not going to pretend that I know this stuff. So the legality of it is one thing, but yeah, you definitely can violate the terms of service especially in the industrial control systems world. They hide behind that a lot, and I intentionally use the word hide because they're like, oh, you can't test our stuff because you're not licensed for it. It's like, we've had that happen where we've tried to report bugs to companies, and they're like, well, we're not accepting your bugs because you're not a licensed customer. Therefore, you cannot have reported this bug, or you could not have found this bug otherwise. And it's like, it's in your trial software. We found it that way. And in those cases, those are one of those cases where we have to disclose publicly because they will not acknowledge the bug without some public pressure.
Right. And that is unfortunately the world we live in, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Is the term virtual patching, is that a Trend Micro thing or is that a like branch standard term?
Virtual patching is definitely a Trend Micro thing, but it goes beyond just Trend Micro. And it's one of the things that the ZDI does is we take these bugs that we purchase and we turn them into filters that become virtual patches specifically for the tipping point IPS device. Yeah. But yeah, that's what I'm referring to when I say you get these protections ahead of time, you get these virtual patches ahead of time. And that's really what it comes down to. It's not exclusive to Trend Micro, but we definitely, I think, do it better than just about anyone. Of course, that's my very, very biased opinion.
I've only heard of the term virtual patching through Trend Micro, and I think that it's just surprising, right? If you know that, like for example, end days, right? And just for those listening, is it correct so that if nobody's ever used it before, if it's never been observed, it's a 0 day, but as soon as it's released, then it's an end day because it's out there, and you just have to
as soon as it's patched or it's public, it's an end day because it's been known for n number of days.
N number of days, exactly. So why don't more vendors? Or do they? Is it just me that's not like up to date on vendors that do this virtual patching, but just don't call it virtual patching? They probably call it something else.
Well, there are a couple other vendors. Zero Patch, I think, does it. They release micro patches independent of the vendors. Cool. But for most of the IPS system itself is not a very common thing. A lot of people don't do that anymore.
Not anymore. Yeah.
So Trend Micro, with the tipping point device, really does that very well. It does it very, very fast too. I mean, the line speeds that they can handle is really, really crazy. But most people don't do that, so they don't have something sitting in line that can be a virtual patch device. Then it becomes too difficult for them, so they just don't try.
Yeah, and people don't want stuff in line just because they're scared that it's going to like stop the network, though, right? That's
right. A lot of people don't, but with the tipping point, you can either have it in just observe mode or prevent mode. So yeah, but it's pretty interesting how fast it goes. And I know the team down in Austin, they're doing some amazing work with that device, and it's really, really cool. I actually, like, even before I was at Microsoft, I was a defense contractor for the U.S. Air Force, and we had tipping point back in 2002, and it was the fastest thing we'd ever seen. It was really good even back then, and it's only gotten better. I can't remember the top speed now, but it's, multiples of gigs that it can go at line speed. So it's really crazy.
The concept of like attack surface monitoring. I've heard that so many times. I don't even know what it means anymore because it depends what vendor is pushing it. What does that mean in your mind?
Right. So in my mind, it means understanding what you're trying to defend. So that's one of the biggest challenges that defenders have. The network these days is so complex. There's so many devices on it. There's so many targets on it. Understanding your attack surface is one of the hardest jobs that you have as a defender, to make sure that you're actually defending it. Because there's more than defending than just patches, right? You have a bunch of different things that you can use to defend your network. So attack surface monitoring is really understanding not only what you have to defend, but what the risk is from it. So for example, the risk to all your Windows devices goes up on the second Wednesday of every month, because you just had the second Tuesday where all the bugs were released, patch Tuesday, exploit Wednesday. So understanding that. But what if there's something that happens like with your Cisco switches, like they put out a patch, and you need to understand that this is now a higher risk, and you need to look at these more carefully, even if you can't patch them, even if you know that, okay, our next patch is going to be this Saturday because, we can't do the network outage that it takes to update this. So just understanding what is really the risk in your network at any given time, especially understanding what is on your network at any given time. And that is really difficult to understand. And I've talked to people, going back to industrial control systems, talk to people with OT devices. It's like, we can't find it. Like, we know it's on the network. We can ping it. We can talk to it. We have no idea physically where it's at.
Yeah, physically, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, we don't know where this thing is. And we're trying to patch it. We're trying to do these things, and you have to physically hit a reset button or something, and we can't find it. So it can be incredibly difficult. And I've talked to multiple people in multiple environments going, yeah, that's a real thing, that we just can't find this device. So how do you defend something that you physically can't even put your hands on? And that's an attack surface, and that is really when it comes down to the ASMR, the management of it. Where is your risk? Well, how can you defend it? What can you do? And where do you prioritize? I always say that everyone in this industry is 3 unders. You're understaffed, you're underfunded, you're under pressure. And you have to do resource management, because you don't have just resources you can throw at the wall and just see what sticks. You got to be mindful of what you're doing. So that to me is attack surface management.
And I mean, obviously you might be a little biased towards one side here, but what does that look like in like a daily perspective if you're under on 3 areas, right? So how would what's your sort of insight into that?
Well, I think it comes down to a lot of like what tools you're using and what techniques, and understanding what you have on the defensive side. And obviously patching is one thing, but you have network segmentation, you have your firewalls, you have your EDR, XDR, you have your IDS, IPS, you have, whatever you have, and I'm going to keep this vendor neutral,
Thank you.
But whatever you have, how are you observing that, and how can you best utilize those devices? How are you keeping up to date with information? Like, where are you getting your news from? Like in those 5 minutes where you're not getting alerts, where do you read about the latest threats to your system? So that's the thing to me, is like just understanding what tools you have available that you've paid for, that you use, and how do you get those to their maximum value? And are you keeping those updated? So for a lot of people, like I always said, an antivirus with out-of-date signatures is worse than no antivirus at all. So are you sure that you're update on all of your signatures and your filters and your patches and that sort of thing? So that to me is what the day-to-day looks like, is coming in, understanding my tool sets, and using it to the best of its ability, whatever that tool set may be. Whether it's something simple like Snort as an IDS, or your EDR, or just even network segmentation, so that if you do have some sort of outbreak, you can take down that segment quickly and not have it spread to your entire enterprise.
Right. And one thing I want to touch on there, you like the concept of staying up with the latest threats, right?
It's difficult.
What does that look like? I mean, you have a research team dedicated to that, so I guess that your point of view would be that we have people making sure that is. But yeah, so just what does that look like from their point of view?
From my point of view, it's an RSS feed with like way too many things popping off, every hour. But it can be a lot of things. Obviously, subscribe to whatever you can. So whether that be newsletters, an email list from vendors, or RSS feeds. So subscribe to those news sources that are going to be reliable, but also where the signal to noise ratio isn't crazy. So you're not getting thousands of alerts for really minor stuff. There's also social media that you should follow people on, whether it be Twitter or Mastodon or now Blue Sky. There's a lot of good folks on Blue Sky these days, but it's overwhelming drinking from this fire hose. So you almost have to take and figure out which taps can I turn off and figure out what's really important, especially to your network or to your enterprise or whatever. So for example, if I have an entirely Windows enterprise, I'm going to turn off all the Linux, stuff. Because at that point, I don't have the resources to handle it. And conversely, if you're, a Linux shop, turn off a bunch of that Windows stuff because you don't really need to care. So definitely focus on, and this is another case of like, if you're running Apache web servers, you want to make sure that you're getting all the Apache news, and you can ignore these other web servers, the news for that. So it's not as important to you. But it's, again, a case of understanding what you're trying to defend and then focusing your news sources on the places that are reporting things in those things, reporting bugs in those areas, I should say. So, yeah, it's difficult because there's so much news, there's so many bugs, there's so much stuff, and it is easier for me because I have a whole research team telling me what's important. But I also have a few trusted reporters and a few trusted news sources that I follow that are going to tell me the most important things that I need to know, and then work backwards from there.
Do you agree that, like, when you hear about a patch these days, it's not because there's a patch available, it's because it's being exploited? Because there's just like so much noise about, like, the only thing that pop up on LinkedIn or Blue Sky or whatever is the stuff that's like actively being exploited. Is that sort of the case?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, the squeaky patch gets exploited. So yeah, there's so many patches that are coming out all the time. Like there's usually 50 from Adobe every month. There's usually around 100 from Microsoft every month. There's 20 plus from Cisco. There's all of these things that are coming out every single month. And it's hard to pay attention to them because only about 5% of those actually get exploited. So you have to really focus on which ones are the most exploitable. And it's really, really hard to figure that out. Microsoft tries to do it, but they don't do it very well. They haven't done it very well for years. Nowhere else even tries, though. So kudos to them for at least trying. So a lot of times the ones you hear about are the ones getting exploited. So it becomes very difficult to weed through all of this noise to prioritize on what is being exploited and what will be exploited. Because it's easy. Microsoft will tell you every Patch Tuesday, it's like, these 2 bugs are currently under active attack. These 3 are publicly known. Here's the other 97. But out of those 97, some of those are going to get exploited. And which ones Microsoft gives you a little hint. It's like, we think this is more exploitable. We think it's less exploitable. They're wrong all the time. Again, kudos to them for at least trying, but it's really hard to guess exploitability. All you can do is look at this and go, wow, this is a CVSS 9.8. It affects all of the servers I have on my network, and it's wormable. I need to pay attention to this one, even if it never gets exploited. And there was a couple bugs like that in this last Patch Tuesday that are incredibly severe, incredibly applicable. Will they get exploited? I don't know. Probably not, just running the numbers and playing percentages. But is that a risk that you're willing to take as an enterprise defender? I'm not. I'm not willing to take that risk. I'm willing to work a few extra hours to make sure those get patched. But yeah, that's the sort of thing. It's like, you have to look at the severity of the bug. You have to look at the applicability to your network. I mean, maybe it's a super severe bug in WordPress. You go, hey, I don't use WordPress. Okay, great. Then you don't need to worry about it. But if it's something that you are using, hey, it's a super severe bug in Apache. It's like, oh my God, I have like 14 Apache servers. Then yeah, you need to take the time to test and deploy that update. But again, it comes down to knowing what you're trying to defend. And that is a difficult scenario, I understand. But that's why I say be ruthless in your asset discovery. And again, I use the word ruthless intentionally there because you have got to get out and find everything that you've got.
All the shiny, cool new stuff ends up boiling down to the bare bit, the necessities in the foundation,
Yes.
which is why it's called the foundation, I guess. Have you ever, like, some of the smarter clients who've seen doing this, like that just knowing what you have, all those sort of things, like have you ever heard of like a customer that had like a really novel way of going about that, or is it just sort of boring foundational stuff that's not really fun over a podcast?
It's really boring foundational stuff that's not really fun over a podcast. I have seen some programs that do passive discovery for their assets. That's very interesting. But passive OS fingerprinting has been around for at least 25 years that I know of. So, it's not called Rumble anymore. H.C. Moore's new company, they do it very well from everything I've seen. And I can't remember the name of it. I apologize. But their entire product is about asset discovery. And apparently they're doing it so well that they can tell you the version of whatever you're using. Like if you've got EDR deployed, they can tell you the signature level of the version that you're running, even beyond just that you're running EDR. So I think that's pretty novel. But of course, that's a third-party product that you're going to have to pay to use. But yeah, so the ones that have done it very well are the ones that are the ones I've seen that are incredibly restrictive on change management and incredibly disciplined on patch management, which can get in the way of user interaction. And it's always that balance, right, of the users want to do everything. They want to, have all of these access. They want to do this. They want to do that. Security says, no, there's got to be a balance in there someplace of letting your users do what they want to do and actually be able to do their job, whatever that function is. And security saying, no, you can't do that. You can't have the latest shiny thing because we haven't tested it yet, and so on and so forth.
It's hard for them. Poor IT team.
It's difficult. I mean, security is difficult. I mean, that's why we're employed. That's why I've been employed for 30 years in the IT security industry, because it's hard. And it's, I don't know when we're going to ever get to a point where it's easy. I hope we could get to that point. But yeah, security in enterprise is a difficult challenge. There's a lot of things you have to balance. And the users always want more. They always want more access. They always want more freedoms. They always want to bring in this new software or this new device, or, I just got this thing at Best Buy and I want to hook it up to the corporate network. And they don't like being told no. So there's a balance of that. And there's some, logic to that as well. It's like, this is a really cool device that will help me in my job. Why shouldn't I use it? And then security has to step in and go, well, because it does everything in clear text, that it shows all of our secrets to anyone who might be listening. So there's a back and forth, and there's a balance there. And it is definitely difficult. But if nothing else, it ensures that we're going to be employed for a long time to come.
Yeah, right. Well, that's at least positive for some of us. So speaking of patches and everything, like, Palo Alto today, it could be Avanti tomorrow. It'll definitely be one of the two, right? And even Trend has some vulnerabilities.
Absolutely. We're not unique in that area.
Yeah. Where do all these vulnerabilities come from? Why is there so many in Avanti and all these like big, so successful companies? Why is there so many? And I've heard like it's just like they bought company that bought a company that bought a company, and all of a sudden you're on a 2004 version of something that nobody knows what it is anymore. Like, is that really what it is, or is there more to it?
Well, that's one of the reasons it is like it is. Definitely the acquisitions. You look at things and it gets bought by this one and this one and this one. And all of a sudden, like, this incredibly important piece of software is running off code that some intern wrote in 2004. That's one of the reasons. There are other reasons. Is there's more people looking these days. So the number of researchers, the number of people out there has just increased exponentially. And they're looking at it because there's more to look at. The amount of software available today. I think back to 2008, 9, 10, what Microsoft was patching back then versus what they patched this last Patch Tuesday. I'm seeing stuff that never would have gotten patched, whether it be GitHub or LLMs or machine learning stuff or open source stuff or Xbox stuff, and like all this stuff that's getting patched these days because there's so much more out there that could be exploited. It's financially interesting to people right now through people like the Zero Day Initiative or BugCrowd or HackerOne, or even going straight to the vendor-specific programs like Google or Microsoft or Adobe or whatever. But then software these days is not built with security at the beginning. Software these days is built to get to the market fast and then bolted on with security later. And what we're finding out, which we find out every single year and we never learn from, is that's not a very smart way to build software if you want it secure. You have to build in security at the foundational part of it. And there used to be a thing called the secure development lifecycle that would go into this and show you how to build secure software. And it's just not followed very much these days. You have all of these things that are rushing to get to market. And I'm not going to call out any vendor because no vendor's perfect. And, better is very qualitative. But yeah, it's one of those things where there's so much software out these days. It's rushed to market as fast as possible because if you don't publish, you perish. And, there's just security bolted on at the end. I'm always fascinated by security researchers and how they are so inventive with coming up with various things to exploit systems. I'm hopeful that with LLMs and with AI, we will get better at code review prior to release. I'm not impressed with what they've done after release, looking at a piece of released closed source software. I am impressed with some of the things that they can do looking at an entire code base. So I'm hopeful, if there's anything to be hopeful with for AI, is that we'll get better at code review. And we can find some of these things, especially the simple things, stack-based buffer overflows, command injection, double freeze. These are relatively simple bugs to find when you're looking at the source code. But it astonishes me that they still exist in the wild. In our last pwned own, we had a format string bug in one of our products. And format string, it was just 2002. I mean, it was incredible. I haven't seen a format string bug in years, but there was one there. And it was just kind of astonishing that it made it through all that code review for a big product from a multinational, corporation. It's so it's a combination of things. It's not just one. You can point to a lot of different things on why there's so many bugs, but it really is a combination of a lot of different things.
What do you think about that report that was saying that shift left is bullshit? Like that IBM made up this whole. Have you heard about that one? It's like
which one is this?
IBM and the Ponemon Institute came out a long time ago, and they were the ones that, I'm not sure if it was them, but the whole shift left, right? What they were saying in the report is if you fix a security bug before it gets released, then it's going to cost you $10, whereas if you fix it in production, it's going to cost you $10,000. But they said that there's no evidence behind it. It's bullshit, is what the new thing is.
I've been there, so I know the price of how much Microsoft paid to fix bugs.
Yeah.
And I know, just with my personal experience and looking at budgets, it's cheaper to fix it in production than to fix it after it ships, period. So, because I know fixing a bug before pre-release is going to cost you however much dollars it's going to cost in, personnel hours or whatever, retesting. They were multi-million-dollar bugs at Microsoft. And you can't tell me fixing something in pre-production is multi-million dollars. I'm sorry.
Exactly. Yeah. Well,
I think there's no evidence of that because no one wants to talk about how much it costs. I still don't feel right saying actual numbers from Microsoft, even though I haven't worked there in years. But yeah, no one wants to talk about how much it actually cost, because if your customers figure out how much it actually costs for them to ship a patch, they're going to be furious. It's no wonder the stuff is so expensive because it costs so much to fix a patch. And at least to fix it correctly, because all the patches. One of the interesting thing about patches is it shines a gigantic spotlight on whatever's being patched. So if there's a variant of that bug, researchers are going to find it. So you have to find it first. So you have to do variant testing on the thing that you're patching to make sure that any closely related things you're going to find before the attackers do. So just in that testing alone, it's going to be more money than just, here's a stack-based buffer overflow. Let me fix that real quick. Or, here's command injection bug. Let me clean up the input on that. it's going to be more expensive. And that's just the reality. And as someone who's been around patching since 2008, the reality is it's cheaper to fix it before you ship it. Period.
Right. I guess, is the future moving forward with all these vulnerabilities? Is it like whether it's software, or what do they call it? What do you call it in trend? Software patching? No.
Virtual patching?
Virtual patching. Is that just like something that everybody needs to just figure out a process for, because it's just the sheer numbers? I don't know how they're doing it today. I feel bad for them.
Yeah, I feel bad for responders as well, because I managed networks in like the late 90s and early 2000s, and it's so much harder these days than it was when I did it. And it was hard then. So yeah, I really feel for folks. I think what people are really going to have to figure out best is looking at their network defense as a team. Whether it be like, okay, I've got this, I've got that, I've got this, and then understanding that, okay, my running back is going to be this product, and it does this thing, or this is my wide receiver. I'm sorry, I was watching football last night, but but you have to, like, patching is incredibly important, but we also know that patching should be tested before you roll it out. I think what's going to happen is, so they have to look at things holistically, and I hate using that word because it's such a buzzword or whatever, but they have to look at everything available for them as far as their defense goes, whether it be something like virtual patching, again, network segmentation, or different IDSs, IPSs, EDR, XDR, all the letters, whatever you have, whatever you can afford. You're going to have to figure out how that works best together, and then lower the number of panes of glass that you look at to have to monitor all that stuff. But I think what it's really going to come down to is, sooner or later, the vendors are going to have to step up and stop making garbage patches. Patches break stuff all the time, and that's unacceptable. Especially for certain ways. It's like, how in the world did you miss this in testing? Those really things, there's going to come down to liability somewhere on that, whether it's people getting sued, vendors getting sued by customers. We saw this recently with CrowdStrike. Delta Airlines is now suing CrowdStrike and Microsoft for a bad update. So that's kind of the first really big salvo in that. And I'm not going to try and comment on whether or not the case has any merits. It's far too complex for me. But that's happening now. There's going to be a point where the government gets involved too. The FAA was already looking at that because it shut down so many airlines. It's like, should this be legislated? And I think it's going to come to a point where it has to be, if they don't clean up, they have to be legislated. And no one wants that. No one wants legislation around this. But if you look at the continued poor quality of security patches, sooner or later, some senator is going to step up and go, this affected my constituency. This has to be dealt with. It's been a problem for 30 years. We have to make it stop.
Yeah.
And I think that's really where it's going to head if the vendors really don't clean up their stuff. And I think there are going to be a lot of network defenders who will be absolutely thrilled with a better quality of patch. Because right now, I don't tell people to patch. I tell people to test and patch. Because, rolling patches straight up to production, that's risky. And people, I don't say this, but there are people who say, turn off automatic updates on the second Monday of every month, so you don't automatically get patched and then automatically get broken. And I've been on the side where I've broken people. Like I broke Norway twice.
Yeah, really?
Yes, I sent out a bad update. Norway's offline. I'm like, oh my goodness, how did I manage that? Then did it again 3 months later. So yeah,
you're forgiven.
But it happens. But yeah, there's got to be some improvement in quality. There's got to be some outcry from the people who are really being affected by this the most. And we saw this with the airline industry in the CrowdStrike update, but that's just the most egregious example. There have been a lot of other examples over the years with a lot of different vendors, and I'm not trying to pick on just one vendor here, because there's a lot of blame to spread when it comes to that. So yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting over the next decade to see where it goes legislatively, either in the courts for being sued, or from the government EU perspective. And I really think the EU is probably going to lead the way on this, even over the U.S. government.
Well, it's because you have 50 states.
Yes.
We have 29 or something like that. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I never really thought about that. Like, you have a patch comes out, security's like, patch, and then there must be another side of the company that's like, ah. Do you think it's been more incidents caused by the security incident due to not patching, or patching automatically and dealing with consequences?
Really, if you look at the numbers, there've been more incidents and more downtime from bad security patches than there have been from attackers.
No way.
And it's terrible, but people are afraid of security patches. I mean, beyond just being inconvenient, because all of a sudden you have this little pop-up says, you need to restart, you need to apply patches, whatever, because it never pops up at a time where you're just watching a YouTube video. It always pops up when you're doing something important, right? But yeah, beyond just being inconvenience, they often break things. I always say the fastest way to get fired as a sysadmin is to break email, and the fastest way to break email is to patch Exchange. And it happened with this last security patch too for Exchange, where people applied it, and sure enough, it broke a bunch of Exchange servers. So Microsoft has withdrawn that patch right now. So you have a bug that is publicly known that you cannot patch because the security patch broke the Exchange server.
And you got to roll back to a vulnerable version.
You have to roll back to a vulnerable version, exactly. And that's part of the problem is like these patches are of such poor quality that people are afraid of them. And that's why I say test and deploy, because you have to figure out what's going to break in my environment. Because there's so many variances in different environments. That's one of the big advantages of Apple is they control so much of their own, enterprise,
their own supply chain,
everything. Yeah, their own supply chain, so they can get away with more of that. But that's still, a very interesting area. Apple's had bad patches too. So how do you have a bad Apple patch? I mean, what scenario are you not taking into account for there? But it happens.
A bad
so
Apple.
yeah, there's been more downtime from bad patches than from actual attacks.
Wow. I've actually never thought about that. I guess we should end there then. End on a strong note.
Yeah, I'm very passionate about patches, and that's one of the reasons why is because they affect so much stuff. And we've been saying it for over 20 years is patch is the best thing you can do to protect your networks. And yet we're still so bad at it, and people don't do it. And one of the reasons people don't do it is because patches break things. There was a huge printer, a huge bunch of printer bugs that came out a couple of years ago. Print Nightmare was the name of it.
Yeah, I remember that.
Those patches broke so much printing. It's like, well, yeah, if I turn off printing, I'm no longer, vulnerable to this bug, but I need to print stuff.
Yeah.
And it was terrible. It took months and months and months to get it straight so that the printers were safe and working. And yeah, it's, you have the big incidents like the CloudStrike, but you have all of these smaller incidents that add up over time. And yeah, patching is the state of patching is really abysmal, and we have to be better.
Yeah, I guess the thing that has in common on both sides is the speed, right? Like bad software because you got to go to market, and then bad patches because there's a problem, you got to fix it.
Yep, you got to fix it. But especially with people saying you have 120 days or whatever. Yeah, those jerks. Yeah, always hold me accountable.
Right. Well, Mr. Childs, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your expertise and your opinions.
No problem, Rob. Happy to be here. But yeah, I've enjoyed it.
Cool. Well, keep up the good work at the 0 Day Initiative, and keep having fun at Pondone, and we'll see you around. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you. See ya.
Ciao.